and welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and I hope you've had an absolutely brilliant week in bonsai. I know I have. The weather's been all over the place. It's been like it's almost snowing to today. Beautiful, nice sunny day, so who can pick it? But that's spring in Australia, right? We tend to get this turbulence of weather and all the different elements that come with it. So that's the motivating factor for this episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I want to talk about when things don't go necessarily to plan or to schedule with your trees for factors that are completely outside of your control. And the weather is the biggest one that we cannot control. What we do and how we treat our trees. And I'll just run through just a few little things that I do around my yard when I take into account the different elements that have taken a strange turn for extremity around the place. So I'll talk about that in the podcast. Plus, it's also a great time to be talking and working on your spruce and cedars. In fact, it's a fantastic time. It's the right time for me to do part of my yearly maintenance schedule with them. So I'll talk about that and the reasons why and what to expect and where it's going to get to next. So let's get into the podcast. The environment that your bonsai are in, your trees are in, it's you have some control over positioning and maybe some sheltering and that sort of thing, but really the environment is what it is. And we can't change that. We can manipulate a few little things here and there, but all in all, it's pretty much one of those things which is out of our control. And when you get these care calendars for your bonsai, and my thoughts on them again are that they're great for a basis, but they're something that needs to have a lot of asterisks all over them saying, but, things can change. This is not always the way this is going to be, and you'll need to make sure that you're adjusting. Don't just look at a calendar and say, okay, it says I should be doing this, so I'm doing this. And you need to, as I always say, you've got to get up close and personal with your trees. You've got to know your trees. You've got to be able to read your trees and understand what's happening, as well as keeping one solid eye on the forecast and what's likely to happen, because it changes day to day. And in Melbourne, it changes hour to hour. It really does. You go from one day you've got hail and sleet and you're barely not even reaching double figures, and it feels like temperature is down, to 3-4 degrees at one point. The next day you're at 24 degrees, sunny, beautiful, no wind, and it's very calm. Doesn't help with the lawn, makes that grow rapidly. And also the trees, the growth rate on the trees this spring has been great, but it's something that you need to be constantly focusing on. So if you get, and what I mean by this is I talk about fertilising. All right, fertilising is very basically a tea bag per month per tree during the growing seasons of spring and autumn. All right, very simple, very basic. Now, if you've had an extremely wet period over spring, for instance, just like we have, then that water, that excessive rain that's come down may well have taken away the effectiveness of the fertiliser. So that 1 month period of saying that your fertiliser is going to last for that period of time, with the rain, it may not last anywhere near that. So you think you've done the right thing by your trees fertilising, but it's just been constantly flushed out of the pot to the point that it's useless after an extremely short period of time. Say a week or a couple of days or 2 weeks, whatever it is, but you're not getting the fertiliser into your tree at the rate that you think you are. So you have to adjust. You have to not stay static with it and not think that, hey, that's it, I'm done. Tea bags are on there, perfect, good on you. Looks like there's something in there, because there's always going to be sediment in there, but the value for the tree just is not going to be there. So change. It might be things like a short-term liquid feed. For me, I don't use liquid feeding because it's just too many trees. I just find it highly ineffective, and value for the tree for me just isn't there compared to the tea bags. But with this spring rain that we've had recently, liquid feeding is definitely something that I'll be doing with my trees. I'll go out there on a day like today where there's no wind, there's no rain forecast for a good period of time. The trees are nice and wet. They've been given, I've already given them a water this morning, even though we've had all this rain. When I went and did a check last night, I found that the trees were very dry. So again, your trees are still in a growing period, so they're going to be taking up that water quite rapidly. But I walked around, watered the trees nice and early, checked them all out, looked at the fertilizer bags. I mean, really, I've got to get, especially my pines, my black pines, where I want to be doing some serious work with decandling on them, and maybe some trees that I've candle cut that I think, possibly could do with a bit more feed. A liquid feed for those ones, at least in my collection, is going to give them a bit of a shot in the arm, a bit of a boost. It's not going to be quite as good as putting on another fertilizer bag, but maybe it'll be enough for me just to get through. So what I'm trying to get through, I suppose, is that when you've got these extremities of weather, you've got to make allowance for it. Weather's a hot topic in the bonsai world. There's been frost in Canberra overnight, and I've seen multiple pictures of affected trees from different people where they've been burnt by the frost. You look over to the west and in Perth, it's stinking hot. It's well in the 30s already. So, like I said, Melbourne, we're single digits. There's frost warnings on the news. There's extreme heat. There's strong winds. Sydney, New South Wales, cops up to near 40 degrees a few weeks ago. So it's something that needs to be managed. If you've got excessive heat nice and early, don't hold back on your summer plans because the calendar doesn't say that it's summer. Start working into the fact that, hey, I might need to be putting up shade cloth a lot earlier. I might need to have that watering system in place to make sure that I can water when I'm at work and I'm not available during the day to cool the environment down. Start allowing for it now. Don't wait and say it's something that I'm going to get to in the future, because the damage will be done too quickly. It doesn't take very much. And if you look at your trees at this period in time, where we're nearly at the end of the spring period, the calendar spring period, heading towards the warmth of summer, but the leaves may not have hardened off yet, especially some of those new shoots. And if you've got any trees like I have where I'm allowing them to push out a little bit longer in the next few weeks, then I'll get round to cutting them. But those fresh new shoots that are pushing out all over the tree, they are extremely vulnerable. And I don't want the tree to have to go through that process of having all the new foliage burnt off, or maybe some leaves that haven't hardened off just yet be damaged. Because, as I was talking about this with someone the other day, and they said, well, now I've just got to look at those trees, at the leaves on that tree until it can be corrected. Yep, that's right, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, they're not gonna, destroy the look of the tree. But it is something that it will be there for you, and it's just one of those things that you need to make sure that you're taking steps accordingly. And I find this is a bloody turbulent time. Wind is the killer. As I said so many times, it's the least liked element as far as I'm concerned, because it does so much damage to your trees. Not only dries them out, but it knocks them off the bench. I can't tell you how many trees I've had to go and pick up and put back on the bench. I tie them down, it snaps the wire that I used to tie them down. It's just painful, and you get fatigue not in yourself, but in whatever you're using to tie your trees down over a period of time. What was okay maybe last year or even a month ago, that may have worn down and become worn out. So next time there's a strong wind gust, it may break, and then that tree comes off the bench, pot breaks, you've got things to sort out. I find that when I've got big sacrifice branches, they're a bit of a bloody nightmare, to be honest, because sure, they're doing their job, but they're like a big sail for the trees. They're the ones that normally whatever's tying them down wears out quickest, and they're the ones that end up on the ground, and invariably they get broken pots. So Go figure. Whereas I have little trees or other trees that maybe, are snuck in between other pots. Maybe they're not quite tied down as well. I'll admit that. They blow off. They don't tend to break the pots. They generally don't, get a lot of broken branches either on it when that happens. But it's definitely wind is one of those ones that you've got to allow for. And I do check my bigger trees, and how I check them is I walk up, grab the trunk or a branch, and just give it a bit of a wobble. If there's too much play in there, then I know that whatever's tying it down is going to be getting flogged a little bit harder and worn out a little bit quicker. So therefore, I'll upgrade. I'll check. I'll check if it's plastic strapping that I've used. Just check if there's any wear points on it. Does the plastic start to deteriorate? If it's a bit of aluminium wire, 2.5 mil or 2 mil or whatever it is that I've used to tie these things down, how does that look? Is there starting to be a bit of crimping in the edges? And just grab the tree and just give it a firm pull. See if the wire or whatever it is that's tying the trees down is going to break. I've seen some brilliant examples of different things with, hooks being put up over the edges of the pots to hold things down in really windy environments, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. So it's one of those things that you need to, like I was saying at the start, you can't control all of the environmental factors you can't control, but you can definitely manage your trees in that environment. If it is a windy environment, what are you going to do about it? If it's a hot environment, what are you going to do about it? If it's a extremely wet environment, what are you going to do about it? If it's going to be cold, if there's going to be frost, if it's going to be snowing, for God's sake, as we head towards summer, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to take action to be prepared so your tree doesn't pay the ultimate price? And for me, it's like I said, I spend a lot of time on the weather apps. I check the weather on the TV, on the Idiot Box, when I'm watching the news, and I sort of plan for the future, plan for the next day, plan for the next week. Look at it. Might not always be correct. In fact, most times it's probably not correct, but at least I'll know, when it comes to spraying or feeding or whatever it is, to know that, hey, I've got an extremely wet day coming up in future, or there's a big, low pressure system cell moving over with strong winds attached to it that'll be here in another day or two's time. Right, get out now and check my trees and tie them down. Make sure that it's not the sort of thing that catches you by surprise. Doesn't take much, and there's some great apps out there that you can tap into to have a look and get reliable forecasting for your specific area. But I talk about planning for the heat of summer. It's the turbulence of spring that really does my head in more, because at least once we get to the consistency of that warm weather, that warm dry weather, I know what I'm dealing with. At the moment, this chop and change from hot to cold to dry to wet, it's just a pain, and it's something that you just have to factor in with your trees and just work to not the care calendar that you've made up. That's a guide. But if things start to change and start to fluctuate into extremes of one or the other, then just start rolling your plans out and forward. Be adaptive to the environment you've got to deal with your trees. And if you are facing an extremity of heat, then maybe bring forward the pre-summer prune or the early summer prune, because you don't want all that new foliage there that's going to get take an absolute beating. You may as well get rid of it now and let it be what it is. So the older leaves might have that heavier coating on them, hardened off a little bit more, easier to manage during that period. And if it's extremely wet, like what I've copped, just keep an eye out for overwatering indicators, as well as future fungal issues from that environment. Now, make sure you've got that airflow that can get through the foliage of the trees. If they're a bit too dense and it's stayed wet like this for extended periods, you can see that there's going to be a problem coming somewhere down the track in a humid environment. So just factor all that in when you're working on your trees. I really love spruce as bonsai. I think they're fantastic. Bark qualities are great. Don't see a hell of a lot of them where I'm based, but they're brilliant for bonsai. They're so well suited for it. You see a lot of them. I see a lot through the states overseas where they get used, and I think they should be a target species. So many different varieties too. What they are, they can be a little bit difficult to identify, but there are some pretty common ones that I see. The Alberta spruce makes its way through the workshop quite regularly. A lot of them get used for Christmas trees around this time of year as well, and they get passed down and then suddenly become bonsai. Fantastic short needles, growth you can manage, can get too dense, can be hard to look after. White spruce, beautiful. There's so many different varieties that their needle length changes, needle quality changes, and I think that they're just a vibrant, great, brilliant tree. So when I was working on one recently, I thought, it's probably something to talk about because they're not commonly known. A couple of things that I really look out for, as I mentioned with the Alberta spruce, is how dense they can become, and that you'll find that there'll be a lot of foliage on the outside of the tree with very little making it into the inside areas where the buds, the bud conveyor that we talked about, should be working from. So when they do start getting styled, I often find that particular variety, they're very long and spindly, and what looks like a fantastic, brilliant choice of material can become very difficult to manage because that backbudding process may or may not happen, could take a long time. But once you start pushing branches down, I find that they're very pretty sparse and all that foliage is on the external tips, and they can be a bit of a nightmare. So just check that out if you are looking at acquiring that variety. Have a look in nice and close on it. Another thing with them is, I promise I'm going to get to the positive stuff, that when you wire them, they can bounce back pretty quickly once you take that wire off. Even with the scarring and wire cutting in and stuff like that you normally wouldn't expect. I do find that with that variety of spruce that they bounce back, and probably the most common, as I said, that I see come through. But a lot of the other varieties of spruce, their foliage holds in place. I use copper on them, but you can use aluminium. Maybe step it up a little bit like you would with a pine, a bit heavier than what you'd expect you'd need for the branch, just to make sure the branch is held in firm position. And they style beautifully. Lots of different varieties of styling. But what I want to talk about is the maintenance work that I'm doing on them at this time of the year. They have a beautiful flush of new growth. It looks really nice. You've got the older, so sort of the needles hang around for a couple of years on the trees. So the oldest is, it's damaged. It looks horrible, dark, old olive colour. Last year's needles look great. They're an olive colour again, sort of heading towards the dull side. But the new growth that comes out is a beautiful, vibrant green, like lime green, just magnificent. Really, really nice, really pretty. I love seeing it grow all over the trees. And about now, so when it gets to this period for me, maybe within the last couple of weeks, there's no set time for me, but it's around about this late October, early-ish November to mid-November. I'll go through and I'll break off I'll cut off or remove the tips or part of the new growth that comes around. A bit like what we do with candle cutting on, say, a Scots pine or a mugo, where you'll come into that new growth and you'll look at removing part of that new growth. They're a bit of a tough beast to get back budding on and to get them to push. So they're, if you would have heard the term elongating species, where they just get longer. They just push and push and push, and all that growth goes to the tips, and they just push out to the point that the branch becomes destroyed because all that foliage stays a long, long way away from where it originated, if they're not managed correctly. So I find that coming in now and removing part of or most of that new growth, leaving some new needles in new leaves behind where I'm making the cut, exactly the same as what I would do when I was doing candle cutting on a single flush pine, then what you'll do is what I'd expect to happen is, in the vast majority of cases, and here comes that little proviso because it doesn't always happen, but in the vast majority of cases, I would expect budding to occur in that new section of the tree, as well as possibly some other back budding further where there's needles on the branches. I'd expect that to happen so buds develop for next spring. So again, you're not going to get a second flush of growth out of these trees, but what you're going to get is you're going to get buds setting. So next year, I'm going to have budding further in closer and stop that that extension of the growth. Stop that growth from getting longer than what it currently is. It'll allow me to get some budding back in a little bit closer. And then, this time next year, I'll go in and I'll do the same thing with it. And then I'd expect budding again. So that's how you start to thicken up and develop pads on a spruce. Well, it's my technique for doing it anyway, is to make sure that I'm on top of that new growth and trying to get the budding back in further. Where you wouldn't do it is if you wanted the branch to extend, to become a sacrifice branch, to thicken, to develop the trunk, to allow the branch that it's on to get thicker for whatever reason. So don't just automatically jump into it and do that across the whole tree. Have a look at the tree first. Again, start with a health assessment. Make sure it's strong enough. Make sure it's certainly happy, and that new growth that's come out is a good length. And this is why I wait until now, because often you'll find at the start, I find that some of the growth can be a bit hit and miss. Some will be a bit stronger, some will be a bit smaller. So what I'll do is I'll just wait until everything sort of catches up and gets to a good length. Then I'll come in and I'll remove the foliage, the tip of the foliage. When I say the tip, if it's a 5 centimetre shoot, I might leave 1 centimetre of new shoot on there. I wouldn't leave 4 centimetres of new shoot just taking out the tip. I would definitely make sure that I roll it back to be as short as I possibly could to keep that growth in nice and close. But I want to make sure that that's happening, but the tree's got to be healthy enough for it to take the next step. And if you do this process too late, then there's not enough time for those buds to grow and develop before it goes into the dormancy period. So therefore next spring you'll miss the boat. So that's why the timing for doing the work on the spruce, for me, is about now. Again, of course, another asterisk, might vary based on where you are, based on your climate, but all in all, it's around about now. I find that that's enough time for those buds to form and develop. So when it comes around to next spring, I've got lots of new growth popping out from different areas around the tree. The other thing that I'll do with working on it is if I've got a branch that is too long. Like I'll give you an example. I've got bare wood, so the wood's 3 years old, let's say 3+ years old. Then I've got some old scrappy needles, so let's say that's 2 years old. Then I've got some newer needles, and they're 1 year old. Then I get into the new stuff, which is less than 1 year old, right? And if I look at that branch and I think, well, I could remove some of that new growth and get budding up in that area. But if that branch is too long, what are you going to do with it? If it's too long, too thick, too coarse, my approach, it's got to go, right? So if I look at that branch and I think, well, really, I'd prefer to shorten that branch. It'd be nice to have it, but I don't want buds at the tip of that branch. Like it's just it may as well be removed. So if I've got that mindset where I'm thinking, too long, got to go, but I want to cut it, well, what are the chances of it getting budding? Let's say I cut back. If I cut into and I'll give you some rough percentages, right? Very, very rough. Bonsai math, let's call it, right? So if I remove the tip, then I've got a 90+% chance of budding occurring, all right? 90+. I'd say it's a bit more than that, but let's go for a 90+%. If I remove back into last year's growth, so the nice needles, olive, still look okay, then let's say I've got a chance of 30%. All right, of budding occurring. But yeah, it might be a bit more, might be a bit less, but let's say it's 30%. If I go back into 2 years with that old scrappy growth, I drop down to about 3 to 4%, 5%. So there's not much chance of getting budding in that section of the branch. And if I go back to the bare wood, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's zero. You've just killed the branch. So I would look at that and go, okay, so based on those odds, what does the rest of the structure look like around that branch? If that branch dies, if it doesn't do what I expect it to do, will it still be okay? Will the tree still develop and go forward? And if I can say yes, then I will go for a low percentage option. I will come back to, maybe the start of last year's growth where it's, 30%. Or if it's still too long, then I'll come back into the year before and go, well, bugger it. I'm going to take the chance, because if it doesn't work, I'm cutting it off anyway. Like there's really no point keeping a branch that's too long on a tree for me. I'd rather cut it back, roll the dice, see what happens. Well, it didn't work. All right, next year I come and work on the tree, or next winter I get to work on that tree. I look at it and go, well, that branch is dead, cut it off anyway. Or I might look at it and go, hey, I'm surprised. Little buds popped out from that area. Now I can wire it and it's going to become part of the future of the tree. And I'll manage the growth better going forward, making sure that when the new spring growth comes out, around about end of October to mid-November, I'll get in there and I'll remove that new growth and I'll look for buds to start pushing and occurring further back on the cut site that I've made. And hopefully I can keep some growth in nice and close for the tree. So that would be my approach. It can be a slow, gradual thing that you develop ramifications slowly on a spruce over time. Like a 4 or 5 year period where you just do it consistently, time and time again. Don't expect to like get it when you get a maple and you cut it back and you get new growth and go, hey, great, look at that, it's grown. I have to give it 2-3 haircuts in one growing season. It's a very slow process. It's remove, wait. Next year, oh, look, there's buds there. All right, they grow, remove, wait. Next year, oh, there's buds there. It's getting better and better and better year on year on year. So they are definitely worth persisting with, and I've worked them where they've gone from, a nice trunk with nice branches but very sparse foliage to actually having some really nice pad structure in there. But that health assessment to make sure that the tree's going to take the step forward. I wouldn't do it too early. I'd let the branches develop so there's going to have some sort of structure there so the buds can grow off it. Don't do it too late because you're not going to have enough time to get those buds to develop before the dormancy period. So there's a nice sort of sweet spot in between, and for me, I reckon it's right about now. Same as cedars. Like I'm doing a lot of work with cedars at the moment. Just had a nice cedar and pine intensive recently, which was fantastic. But it's nice to get the cedars out after this. They've had their nice push of spring growth. Some might be a little bit behind. Some might be a little bit ahead, depending on the age and development and where they've been over the last 50 years. So it's not always the same for the cedars, but you've got to manage some of that new growth on them about now. Health assessment, make sure that they can take a step forward. And if you've got long spears on the growth, then look to shorten back into that new growth, whether there's a bud there or whether there's not. Like I said with the spruce, you've got a bloody good chance of back budding occurring at right near where you've made the cut. Normally when you look at the new needles on a spear, there'll be buds all the way along it. There'll be little tufts starting to come out at the base of some of the needles that have appeared. So that's generally not a problem. It's also a really good time to be plucking some of the needles that have got too dense. If there's, I talked about fungal issues based on your weather a little bit earlier. I find that the cedars can be prone to that too because they get so dense with their needle mass in there. And if you don't do something about it, not only can you get pests in there, but you can develop fungal issues which lead to dieback of branches or buds and a whole range of things. But I find that you've got to get in there and start plucking some needles. Now's a good time to do it. Remove the oldest first. They're furthest away from the tip. You'll see them. They should have a different colour. Don't use your fingers. You're klutzy with your fingers. Your fingers to the needle size, plus getting in there between the buds, you'll do more damage than good. So just stay away from the buds with your fingers. Use a nice pair of tweezers. My pine tweezers are perfect for it. Get in there and start plucking the oldest needles first, working your way towards the newer, and you'll find that that'll start to open up the space a lot around the trees. They'll look so much better with those old needles gone, but you'll also have it that it's a lot more open, a lot more airflow, a lot more good stuff can happen, and a lot less bad stuff when you're looking after it like that. I don't cut the needles on my cedar. I do pluck them. I prefer that. Just be really gentle. Don't rough. Don't grab 40 needles with your tweezers and try and pull them off because the whole bud will just come off with your tweezers. Just gently, one bud at a time. Pluck in the direction the needles are growing always, and make sure that you're not doing any tearing. And you can do a little bit of wiring. My preference would be to not wire at the moment because they are in a really delicate stage, and I would save the wiring for that autumn winter period when I do majority of work on my conifers. But for now, it's just managing that new growth. If you've got strong spears coming from the apex of the tree, the strongest area, wherever that is on the tree, then look to remove those. Maybe you don't have to do a hell of a lot of work on the rest of the tree, but it'll push resources down to those weaker areas, those weaker buds. And, don't let the strong get stronger. Stop the strong from growing. Push that strength, that vitality, those resources down to those other areas of the tree, and try and balance the tree out a little bit more, which is definitely what all trees need, but especially the cedars. They will let branches start to drop left, right, and centre, and push their energy towards the stronger areas. And I find that getting in there now with tweezers and scissors for a bit of a cleanup, make it look nice. It doesn't have to be show quality by any stretch of the imagination, but getting in there now and doing that sort of thing will certainly help those weaker areas of the tree to become a little bit stronger. So hopefully, if you don't have a spruce, seriously think about it. And like I said, the Alberta spruce, even though you see them a lot, they do make great trees. Getting them at a younger point is better than at an older point. If you do get one at an older point, just have a look at that interior part and just see how that growth is going on the inner areas, because it can be a long uphill battle to try and correct it. Choose your stock wisely, I'm trying to tell you. And other varieties of spruce tree, get into those, because like I said, they make brilliant trees, and they're not hard to manage. They're quite simple, and just require a lot of Bonsai Love and an appropriate maintenance program, and you'll have a brilliant tree in no time. Spring really is a great time of the year. It can be nice and sunny. It can be horribly wet. Everything, but our trees need exposure to the elements. So please don't misinterpret what I've said in the first section of the podcast, meaning that you've got to get a greenhouse and tuck your trees away, and they should live out of the elements. The elements are fantastic for the trees. Just be careful of the extremes. That's all. And what my main point was, if you need to adapt your current care methodology or your approach to certain things like fertilizing, pruning, all that sort of stuff, don't work to the calendar. Work to the environment. Keep an eye on the forecast. Make sure that you're as well prepared as you possibly can be, and don't get caught by surprise, because these little beautiful trees we have in our pots are the ones that are going to cop the impact of that. And it's not the end of the world. Falling off the bench and breaking a pot and needing to get repotted or taped up, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, sure, it's a pain, but it's not the end of the world. Losing a branch, forced redesign, talked about it before. These things, while they're not ideal, not the end of the world, but just try and do the best you possibly can. I think that's all we can possibly do, because it makes a massive difference to our trees. And hopefully, you're into your cedars, and if you've got spruce, get onto those as well, and reach out if I can help with any part of it as well. I'm more than happy to. Thank you for listening in. Thank you to the subscribers. You lifeblood, love you all. You're brilliant. So thank you very much as always. Enjoy your trees, and make sure that you give them a nice big cuddle for me, because they are well loved, just like mine are. All right, until next time, happy bonsai.